Oh, we are live. Okay, very good. Good morning. This is Senate Natural Resources and Energy, and it is Friday, January 9th. And we had some last minute schedule changes. Do hope to have people who were on the schedule in another time. So we are meeting a little bit later, but today is just a bill introduction day. That's the name of the game today. So, we're gonna start with a couple of bills by Snre. And that's it. I think we're gonna roll with that. Legislative council, if you want to come up, great. Otherwise, I'm gonna turn it over to Senator Hardy if you're ready.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank
Great.
you, Madam Chair. Good morning, everyone. So S-134 is the first bill that we're going to talk about, and it's related to municipal regulation of private airstrips. I introduced this last year, and we didn't get to it last year, so this is our first crack at it. And I also didn't know we were gonna go over it until this morning or late last night, so I'm winging it here.
We're very great.
No
Thank you.
pun intended. I actually realized it after I said it, to be fair. This has come about because of a number of concerns from constituents of mine, as the aviation industry has expanded, more and more people are putting in private airstrips that they're on their own land. And municipalities aren't necessarily prepared to deal with what happens when somebody wants to put a landing strip on their land. And there's a lot of sort of gray area about whether municipalities have any role in zoning for airstrips. So it's created a lot of tension in some communities and across the state. In Addison County, in Grand Island County, in Windham County are areas that I know, but I'm assuming it's in Rutland County. Sort of like what happens when somebody who has a lot of land wants to start landing planes on their land. So what this would do is first make it clear that towns can include in their zoning bylaws the location, construction, repair, maintenance, and alteration of restricted landing areas, which are defined in state law. Because once a landing area is put in there, there is less opportunity for state oversight or local oversight, because then it sort of becomes the jurisdiction of the FAA. So once it's there, it's hard to change anything. So making sure that it's done well to begin with, and that it is in a location that's appropriate, and is, taking into consideration other things that are in the town and the neighbors is helpful. It also would make it part of the Act 250 process. That would be, it's always been a little, Ellen knows a lot more about this than me, but it's always been vague about whether they should be part of Act 250, and in some cases, they've been required to go under Act 250 review, and in some cases they haven't been. So this would make it clear that they would have to be. Obviously, we'll get testimony on all of this, but and then this bill would create an aviation advisory council that would have appointments from various people in the industry, and also people who are experts about the sort of impact of aviation on the environment and on public health, and also people who are neighbors of airports and airstrips. And full disclosure, there is an airport, a state airport right near where I live. The planes fly over my house. And a lot of my neighbors are very concerned about it. And so I've been to a lot of meetings at our local airport, and communication with local airports and the people who use those local airports can be challenging for local communities, because a lot of times the pilots who come in and fly there don't actually live there, and they come in and are not present physically to talk to. So this advisory council would talk about sort of communication and making sure that there are open lines of communication between the residents who live near an airport and the people who utilize the airport. In some cases, they're one is the same, but in a lot of cases, they're not. And there would be, membership of the Secretary of Transportation, the Adjutant General or designee. Obviously, the National Guard has a lot of the planes in the state are National Guard planes. Members of the industry, local planning agencies, Pilots Association, the Vermont Aviators Association, and then people who live near airports or airstrips. That's creating that council. And then the final part of the bill is about data. And the state air navigation facilities data tracking. One of the things I've learned from going to a lot of these meetings about state airport is they create plans about the state airports in Vermont, and there are, I can't remember how many at this point, 10 maybe? I was gonna say 11, but there's one less now because then the one in your area was sold, I believe, or is in the process.
It's in the process.
Yeah. So I think there might be 10 now, I don't remember. But they create plans for the airport, which is great, but they don't use actual data from that airport, they use aggregate data that, and because they don't collect data about the number of planes that land and take off, and that data is actually really easy to collect electronically, but they're not doing that on a regular basis. And obviously, this is more transportation related. I'm assuming if we move this bill at any place, it would go across the hall. But it would be to create and track data on a quarterly basis about the use of the airport, the state airports. And this would also give us data on, that would be helpful for budgeting purposes and, how much are we investing in these airports and are they being used sufficiently? And then there is an appropriation in the bill because it would ask the Agency of Transportation to do more work, so it would give them some funding to do that work. And I know that will not go anywhere, but this bill was introduced a year ago, and so it is in there. And that is the bill. I'm happy to answer questions or just turn it to Ellen.
Knowing that we are gonna get a walkthrough with Ellen, do you have a question for Senator Hardy at this point? Okay.
I do. So you didn't mention A&R. Obviously, if you're gonna put a landing strip and you're gonna have impervious surface.
Yeah.
So that's gonna have to get listed, A&R will have to, anything more half an acre or more of impervious surface now has to be.
Yeah, they do have to get
You gotta put
permits for that.
I don't know if that needs to go something about that.
I don't know, I didn't actually think about that when I was drafting the bill, so I'm not sure how that would work, but probably you're right, that's definitely relevant, yeah.
No, it's not grass. Right, no, well, it could be a grass landing strip, but it's gotta be gravel. If it to be impervious, right, yeah.
Well, that something the gravel is an name strip. Curious. Okay. Well, let's turn it over to Legislative Council and
Legislative Council, Legislative Council here on S-134. I don't know how much of a walkthrough you need because Senator Hardy through most of it.
Sorry.
That's
okay too.
give a little bit more context. So section 1 is adding the specific reference to limited. Wait, what do we call them? Restricted landing areas specifically. So for both Act 250 and municipal zoning permits, there are private airships that have received permits from both programs. And that's because both zoning and Act 250 use the generic but all encompassing term of land development. And often construction of any kind whether it's for a landing strip or a building, falls into land development. However, not all airstrips are paved. Then some have required very little alteration to a site in order for it to be used, especially sometimes in like fields. Yeah, as you just talked about, like there may require little to no actual construction to be done, and so sometimes that's why they may not require a permit. But there are a number of examples where private airstrips have been required to get permits either from the municipality and or also Act 250. But so section 1 is specifically requiring and clearing up any gray area that yes, location, construction, repair, maintenance, and alterations of a restricted landing area requires a municipal permit if they so choose. With zoning, zoning is always optional, largely the way that they set it up, so towns don't ever have to have zoning, and then as long as they're operating within the confines of what the statutes allow, they have the ability to be less restrictive than what the statute says. So if the town didn't want to require a permit, they wouldn't have to. But this is making very clear that they are allowed to require a permit. And so just to read you the definition of restricted landing area, the transportation statutes do not use the term airstrip or private airstrip, but when the agency of transportation issues permits for airstrips, they do it under the permitting program for restricted landing areas. And so that is defined as an area of land or water or both that is used or is made available for the landing and takeoff of aircraft, the use of which, except in the case of emergency, shall be only as provided from time to time by the board, the transportation board. So the transportation board issues permits for restricting landing areas. I am not the transportation attorney, so when I wrote this originally, I worked on it with Anthea, and we agreed that restricted area is the thing you are talking about when you talk about private airstrips, so that's why we're using this. And if you want to hear more about what the permitting process is that the transportation board uses, you would need to hear from either Damien from Ledge Council or maybe the Agency of Transportation. You want to know more about what that is, but it's using the term that the transportation agency uses so that it's consistent with also municipal and Act 250 as well. And so then section 2, as Senator already mentioned, adds it again specifically to if you are constructing or operating a restricting landing area that would require an Act 250 permit. And again, I did find that there are a number of existing Act 250 permits for private airstrips, but again, Act 250 for commercial enterprises or for commercial development is always based on the parcel size usually. So there have been times when if it's a small parcel, they may not have triggered and may not have gotten an Act 250 permit. So this is making very clear that any of these restricted areas would need an Act 250 permit. So those are the two land use parts of the bill. The other sections I did work on with Anthea originally, so I'm familiar with them. But if you're gonna ask transportation questions again. So what it comes about section 3 is that there is an existing aviation advisory council, but it is a council that was created by the governor via executive order. And so when we were discussing this with Senator Hardy, the legislature can't necessarily impact the governor's executive order or change their guidelines or parameters or membership unless you put it in statute. And so that's what this is doing. There is an existing council, I believe they do meet, and this would just be moving largely the same. It's largely similar to what already exists, but putting it in statute so then the legislature can weigh in on it if you want to change any of their directives or membership. Did you want me to read through the whole membership of the council and their
I think at this point, it's okay, but if there's a way that you could highlight like the differences between what is here and what exists on the council as it exists now? Is that a fair question?
Yeah, well, I can tell you, the council as it exists now is mostly people, pilots and people from the aviation industry
Okay.
who are talking about, you know, from their perspective, what needs to be done for aviation industry in Vermont. And this is broader, this includes those people for sure, but also members of the public.
Yeah.
And I think part of the goal is that as the aviation industry expands in Vermont, which, you know, is great that it's expanding and we have more people flying planes and, but it's also creating more impact on local communities. And so this is a sort of more balanced advisory council that has perspective from both sides.
Well, with that context, maybe we should go through it. That's something we're
Flying cars,
Or electric helicopters.
sorry.
Yeah.
Sure, so on page 3, section 3. Aviation Advisory Council, and this would go into Title 5 where the other air aviation regulations are. So creation and purpose, there's creating the Aviation Advisory Council to act as a forum to discuss and recommend aviation policy that is in the best interest of the residents of Vermont. State-owned air navigation facility use or infrastructure changes to ensure efficient use of public resources and access to the members of the public. Air navigation facilities use for infrastructure changes to ensure minimal impact on neighborhoods and natural resources surrounding air navigation facilities. State-owned air navigation facility use fees and hangar rental rates that support the maintenance and operation of state-owned air navigation facilities. Practices to reduce the environmental and public health and safety impacts of air traffic and airport operations and infrastructure. On to page 4. Needs to support a responsible and healthy aviation community and industry in Vermont, including protocols to ensure that state-owned air navigation facilities are available for emergency response and preparedness. Public safety standards and policies for reducing the impact and proliferation of private restricted landing areas. Policies to monitor, prevent, and deter aerial harassment. As used in this section, aerial harassment means using an aircraft to harass someone by buzzing, flying low, or circling them or their property with the intent of intimidating or creating distress. The council shall encourage and facilitate open communication between aviators, air navigation facility users, state and local officials, and members of the public, and shall seek to balance the priority of aviators with the health and well-being of the general public. Membership. The council shall be composed of the following. The Secretary of Transportation or designee, who shall serve as chair. The Adjutant General of the Vermont National Guard or designee. One member representing the aviation industry, appointed by the governor. 2 members appointed by the Vermont Association of Planning and Development Agencies, who shall be the members of different regional planning commissions. And in general, VACTA is the overarching, it's like the group of RPCs are all in that group. On to page 5. 2 members representing independent pilots appointed by the Vermont Aviation Association. 1 member from a community or neighborhood association representing the interests and concerns of a community or neighborhood adjacent to a state-owned air navigation facility, appointed by the Speaker of the House. 1 member from a community or neighborhood association representing the interests and concerns of a community or neighborhood adjacent to a municipal-owned air navigation facility, appointed by the Committee on Committees. 1 member with expertise on the environmental impacts of aviation, who shall not be a member of the aviation industry or Vermont Aviators Association, appointed by the Speaker of the House. And 1 member with expertise on the public health impacts of aviation, who shall not be a member of the aviation industry or Vermont Aviators Association, appointed by the Committee on Committees. Assistance. The council shall have the administrative, technical, and legal assistance of the Agency of Transportation. The members who are not employees of the state of Vermont and who are not otherwise compensated or reimbursed shall be entitled to per diem payments. On to page 6. And that's for no more than 4 meetings per year. The terms, other than the Secretary of Transportation, and in general, the terms shall be as follows. So just staggered for the rest of the membership. With half of them being applied, appointed for 1 year to start, and the other half of the membership for 2 years. And then all subsequent appointments are for the unexpired portion of that term, and they're 2-year terms overall.
Okay.
So that brings us to section 4. And so again, this is a transportation issue, so I'll read you through the language, but I don't know a ton about.
I'm just conscious of time.
Yeah. So the agency, this is section 4 at the bottom of page 6, state air navigation facilities data tracking. The agency, which here would be the transportation agency, shall track the date, time, aircraft category or class as defined in 14 CFR 1.1. Elevation of aircraft and takeoff or landing for every aircraft operation at a state-owned air navigation facility. On page 7, the agency shall maintain a web accessible and web searchable data source dedicated to flight data at state-owned air navigation facilities. That includes the data from section A. The web accessible and web searchable data source required under this subsection shall be updated at least quarterly basis, and be provided to the municipality where the state-owned air navigation facility is located on at least a quarterly basis, to be maintained at the municipality's municipal offices and posted on the municipal website if there is one. Oh, and include how the data was reported. And then section 5 at the bottom of page 7 is an appropriation, so $100,000 appropriated to the transportation fund for the purpose of acquiring the technology necessary to perform the data tracking. And they will consult with the Federal Aviation Administration about that. And then on page 8,
I know this is like not a possibility. I will say that the technology, like you literally can get an app on your phone that gives you this. It's really easy to do, and they just don't track it.
Yeah.
And so I don't even, these numbers, it may not be even necessary. It's so electronic. You can say, oh, well, that's Jerry Williams's plane and he's flying at this elevation. I could do it on my phone. So, and honestly, as I said, this was drafted over a year ago, so things have changed significantly.
Not being perfect.
No, I hear you.
Issues.
There's another appropriation for $91,000 as well. So that's one very important.
Okay, thinking about time, because it's just about 10. Senator Hardy, would it be okay if we skip to 19 and come back to it another day? Since we have Michael Creed
Sure.
here.
has to leave.
Okay, so Alan, you're on that.
So does that, what do you think about that? No, that's fine. I don't know if we can circle back to it like later today if there's time. It's probably not possible.
I mean, that's not really a question for me. I'm here.
Okay.
I'm going to leave, but if you
Okay.
want me to come back, please let me know.
Okay, amazing.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, and so we're gonna skip to 19 for now. And move on to 212. And we have Michael Grady here, welcome. So just to
I picked up the wrong file.
do you want, should we take a quick break?
Yeah, can you give me 5 minutes?
Absolutely, okay, we're gonna take a break for 5 minutes. Thank you, Ruth.
Sure, and if we end up doing the bill, which I have some witnesses that.
For tonight's,
Yeah, can speak to them.
I'm sorry, for 19 or for 130?
Well, for any mental
Oh.
health witnesses, but the airstrips one,
Yeah,
for example,
okay,
yeah.
super. That's good.
One and for Tuesday.
So your needs are smart edge.
Mhm.
But
Or not.
I think I like that.
Oh,
Just like, I mean, it's like when net meter and anything, you know,
Also,
that's actually, what do you do with that?
we figured out the Wednesday, was the day we're gonna
I
do
ended up using something that I had about.
next week, Wednesday, or so we'll have to do big Tuesday. Or. Really,
Yeah.
Well, because you don't.
Fire.
Right. Where-
Not really.
anyway, so.
Well, I can tell you, it came about because a constituent didn't want to be required to get a smart meter. He also doesn't want him to pay to not get a smart meter. But when I talked to the water utilities, they're like, there's a cost, there's a cost. If you don't do a smart meter, yeah,
Yeah.
and then if you say I don't have a smart meter and don't pay that cost,
you mean
everybody
everybody
else's water bills go up. So it seemed fair to me to be like, okay, you don't have to get a smart
Plus,
meter.
they don't have to go, they don't have to have somebody to read it.
Exactly. That's why it saves them
Same thing
money.
with Green Mountain Power,
Right,
you know, good, do away with a utility industry now.
right. So that's why I added that, and then also, you know, one of the concerns was exactly that one. So if you're gonna use.
I mean.
We're live.
Okay, all right, yeah, it's a natural resources and energy coming back from a break. Okay, so just a little background on this bill, and one of the things that continues to be the issue that I think about, of course, is how do we make housing faster, cheaper, without compromising the environment. And it came to my attention that there was an opportunity to perhaps do that in the area of wastewater connections. If somebody is making has some construction, has a new construction and needs to connect to, let's say, an existing municipal water and sewer system, that they need to get a municipal permit for that. And of course, if it's a municipal system, the municipality is very invested in ensuring that that connection is done well, and that the municipality has capacity for the load. And so there's a lot of for places that have municipal connections, there's a degree of rigor that goes into that permit. Meanwhile, the state level, so they also need to get a state permit. And my understanding was that there was not a lot of value, I'm gonna call it value add, to the state permit. If what we're talking about is a municipal water or sewer, connection, and then if it's septic, that's something else, and that's a whole different, question. But, could we, potentially eliminate the need for a, state permit, given that there's perhaps a level of rigor to the municipal permit for that connection. And as I was digging into this, Ledge Council, Mr. Grady let me know that there was a study that had actually been done on this. So Act 147 created a study exactly to this end, and so they came up with what seemed like a good solution. And so this bill comes out of that report. And I think, to be fair, I think there may be some good reason to continue to modify this, like to add some levels of specificity for like what we may be looking for in terms of the level of rigor or robustness of that review. That is not included in here, but I think we can take some testimony on that. But the intent anyway is to try to find an efficiency for developers. So do you have a question?
Well, just so, I'm just thinking, if, the municipality's gonna, as far as like TMDL, and they're gonna keep track of that data, anything additional, so.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so.
My full question for. We didn't, a few years ago, we tried to do this and it was in a bill. And I think it was Senator Bray's bill, and then it got turned into a study. Is that how it went? Cause I remember this issue coming up.
This issue's been coming up for about 10 years and you've tried to address it in multiple different ways.
Okay,
Initially, the agency was resistant to addressing this or changing it.
okay,
But over the past few years, the groundwater, wastewater section has been admissive of the fact that this program could be streamlined.
okay. Cause I was like, this is deja vu. I feel like we did this
Yeah,
already.
this is not the first attempt.
You will literally, in this bill, strike what you tried to do for one type of development connection, in order to expand that to all types of locations, Billy should say.
Okay, okay, thank you.
If I can turn it over to you to walk us through.
This is Mike O'Grady with the Office of Legislative Counsel. Just to provide some further background. The state has a potable water supply and wastewater system permit. Potable water supply is a well, a wastewater system is effectively a septic system. But included in that program is the additional action of connecting public sewer system or public water system to a new or existing structure. So those connections are treated the same as getting a well permit or a septic permit. As the chair indicated, there are already municipal permits for some of these connections. In addition, as Senator Williams noted, if you're doing a wastewater connection and you are in town municipality with load allocations for your wastewater treatment plant, you need to ensure that any new addition to the system is consistent with all the treatment plants got a little margin of safety, a little bit of ability to grow well. So you have to make sure that it's within your allocation under the TMDL. The issue has been both the administrative duplicativeness and also cost. Because to get a permit, a potable water supply wastewater system permit today, you have to submit your design review. And it has to be submitted by a licensed engineer or a licensed site designer. And they're not inexpensive. And even if you have one on your municipal staff, it means have that person spending their time to do a connection, which the developers will tell you is not rocket science. With that said, A&R believes there are things that need to be done to ensure public health and to ensure that connections are not done in a way that endangers the public. And that was initially their resistance to changing this program, but this proposal, and I won't speak for the agency, but I have spoken to the head of the division, and he thinks this is a potential way to go forward. He obviously has to consult with his secretary and governor and can't say for sure if they will fully approve, but I do think this has potential. Could it be more specific? Could it be tweaked? Again, yes, and you're also dealing with engineers here and they're persnickety. And so you will probably get comments on the bill.
Okay,
So with that said, on page 1, section 1, 915, you were amending that potable water supply and wastewater system permit chapter, chapter 64, title 10. You'll see what the purpose of the program is. One of the things that you are amending, revising on page 2, line 4. There's already a purpose of this program to allow delegation of the permitting program to municipalities for permitting of all potable water supply and wastewater systems, not just connections. And there were 2 communities that did that, Colchester and Charlotte actually were delegated and were delegated for years. And they have surrendered their delegation. They do not want to do it anymore. And so changing this purpose is consistent with changing the fact that there's no longer a delegated community. But what you're going to do is to allow delegation to municipalities a technical review of potable water supply and wastewater system connections pursuant to the rules of the agency. So connections will now be effectively delegated. So you're moving down on page 2, you get to the definition of potable water supply. It includes a service connection to a public water system of any size that does not require a permit pursuant to chapter 56. Chapter 56 is indirect discharge permits. Those are large community-based, or not necessarily large. They're generally community-based sanitary systems, mound systems that serve multiple connections. And so those are, and that their discharge, how they operate, allows for the wastewater to be basically inundated into the ground. That gets an indirect discharge permit. And so that's a different chapter. You're not talking about that. ANR doesn't want to give up permitting of connections, indirect discharge systems. So that's on page 3, we'll see a slight technical tweak. 11 and 12, the antiquated term for sanitary sewer collection, just sewerage, and that the correct term is sanitary sewer collection that's consistent with ANR's rules. And then you get to the permit section, you'll see 10 VSA 1973 is where all permits are required. For the potable water supply wastewater system permit, you'll see on page 3, 19, and making a new or modified connection to a new or existing potable water supply or wastewater system requires a permit. But then on page 4, one of the ways that you have tried to address the efficiency or improve the efficiency of permitting of connections. Is you on page 4, line 8, in the task that the secretary shall issue a permit for a new or modified connection to a water main and sewer main or indirect discharge system. For a building or structure in a designated downtown development district, so just in those limited areas. That consists solely of the certification and licensed designer. So this bill strikes that focused authority for a licensed designer to approve the connection. And instead, on page 5, line 2 and 5, the secretary shall adopt a general permit for municipal potable water supply and wastewater system connections that are reviewed with municipalities with authority delegated to that pursuant to 1976. All right, why are you just not saying that a licensed designer can do the general permit? And why does it have to be a municipality that's been delegated authority? Because A&R wants capacity at the municipal level to review. They want to know that somebody in the municipality can go and approve a connection and has the skill and expertise to approve that connection. So they're not fully giving municipalities authority. They're saying this general permit in a municipality that effectively has the ability. And one of the things that they're going to look at is not just the ability of the staff, it's the capacity of the system. So we're going to get to that in a second.
We have a question right here.
Didn't you start off by saying there were 2 towns that had this designation and they just gave it up, so there are no towns that have this?
No, this is a different designation.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So the delegation that Charlotte and Colchester had was to permit every well and every septic system and every connection.
Oh,
And everything that A&R's wastewater system, wastewater, groundwater, and water, wastewater system.
okay, this is just the.
This is just the connection.
Got it, okay.
And then you'll see on page 5 that authority for the delegation. The first thing that you're doing is you're striking the authority to delegate the whole program, like it was to Colchester and Charlotte. And instead, on page 6, actually page 7, line 5, the secretary may delegate to a municipality authority to conduct a technical review of connections, provided that the water main and sanitary sewer collection line that the service line and sanitary sewer are connected to and are owned and controlled by delegated municipality. There are some lines, say, in, I don't know the proper term anymore, the constructed home, pre-constructed home parks,
Prefab.
Mobile home parks, where the property owner has ownership over parts of the connection to the overall public water system or wastewater system. And so you're not going to allow for that when it's not the municipality approving that doesn't own that, they can't approve the connections for that.
Yes, go ahead.
So who's fiscal doing that? No, A&R, got people doing
Who's physically doing the approval of connections? So right now, it's just like a potable, it's just like your well and your septic. You have to have someone come out, apply for a permit. The licensed designer or site design, licensed engineer or site designer needs to certify that it meets the design requirements. And it's sent to A&R. Now, A&R does have a kind of a, I don't know, they have a form for this. But you still need to do the certification from the licensed designer. And again, as the chair noted, they can duplicate the municipal permit and the municipal effort. And that municipal analysis of whether or not there's capacity in the system, whether or not it meets your TMDL, you need to figure out if it meets the capacity of your wastewater treatment. Or if your water supply, your public water system is gonna be able to pump to it in sufficient supply. And so that's still gonna be part of this program. But it's gonna be the municipality doing that technical review, and you'll see. That if the municipality submits a request for delegation, the secretary shall delegate. To implement and administer the program, provided that the municipality is qualified to perform the technical review, they have the staff. Or they have somebody on contract to do it. They receive authorization from the municipal legislative body. You're not gonna let your public works department go like rogue here. You're gonna have approval. They have to meet any other requirement for the delegation program adopted by the secretary in writing. And shall only issue permits for water service line and sanitary sewer service lines when there's adequate capacity in the public water system, wastewater treatment facility, or indirect discharge. And complies with the requirements for connection and all requirements of the agency's rules. Now, previously I said they're not gonna delegate indirect discharge. They're not delegating indirect discharge over 6,500 gallons. Under 6,500 gallons, if you're gonna use an indirect discharge, they're gonna allow for connections for that.
I've lost where you are.
Page 8,
Okay, great, thank you.
lines 1 through 3.
Perfect, sorry. Carry on.
And then the last thing is fees. It's on page 8, line 13, section 5. Now, the fee section for A&R permits is almost inscrutable. But there is a provision on page 10 that project permitted under a municipal potable water supply or wastewater system connection will have a $500 fee. And that is different from the existing fee structure because the fee structure now is based on your flow. And your original application will have potentially, if you have a 2,000 gallon and that for between 2,000 and 6,500 gallon per day, you're paying $3,000 per application. You know, and that's pretty high for a building or structure, but 560 and less than or equal to 2,000, that's some businesses, that's some, you know, office buildings having that kind of flow. If you're large enough, and so you would be paying $870 per application for that. And so looking at a way to streamline this program and also make it a little more affordable, to give delegations to the municipality that have capacity, have technical review, the municipal legislative body has approved. And they can only do connections, and then we do a connection, it's gonna be at a lower permit fee than the existing.
I have a question here.
So that $500 fee, does it go to the municipality or does it go to A&R?
So that fee goes A&R.
Why, if the municipality is doing the
That's
work?
why I asked the question.
Because the permit is still A&R's permit.
So does the municipality get anything for doing the work?
For their permit, there's still gonna be potentially.
Still gonna be 2 permits, one for A&R?
This is a more streamlined version of the permit.
Okay. I'm sorry.
This is what came out of that study,
Yeah.
A&R recommendation.
Okay, so what's the municipal fee, or does it vary by town?
It's gonna depend on municipal ordinance.
Okay. Cause it seems to me if they're doing work, then they should be able to cover their work, but then is A&R. Okay, well, this is just so the A&R,
Right, so A&R still retains the authority to review the design and the connection. Because remember I said that they
they're
are,
nitpicking.
well, the engineers. The agency is concerned about public health and making sure that these connections are done right. And this program already runs in a way that is different from some other programs. in that, most other programs, you apply to the agency to get your permit, and they tell you if you've met the permit standard or what you need to do to. This program, the licensed designer submits the design when they apply. And A&R has discretion to review it or not. So in certain instances, if you're a well-known, respected engineer, designer, you might have very little review of your permit application before you are issued a permit. Or they will just do effectively, an audit of the different types of permits or different regional offices and so it's not. And let me just say, why do they do it that way? Why did you authorize them to do it that way? Because that they are authorized by statute. Because this is the division that issues the most permits out of any division at A&R by far. And, you've got high profile DEVA divisions like stormwater and wastewater and, solid waste, but these people are the people that issue the most permits.
Okay. They call it DEVA divisions. There's an actual department
I know.
called DEVA.
So
Yes.
I brought my question up because it sounds like there's some redundancy in. FTE, who's doing the work, who's getting paid for it. So,
Yeah, and talk to Karen Horn, she's still working, I don't know if she's fully retired yet. But she was representing the rural water associations and that association has been calling for something like this, so calling for a change in the connection permitting standards and maybe they will want even more flexibility. I couldn't tell.
I do have the LCT on my list for this possibility. Cool, thank you. We are gonna keep rolling, so log this one away. We will be revisiting that. And then we're gonna give 2 more bills for the morning. So next we're gonna go back to Senator Hardy if you're ready.
Sure.
Okay.
213. Yes.
Thank you. Yes, yes. I know.
Thank you. Okay. This bill is also about water. It's about public water systems and their use of smart meters. This also, like the aviation bill, came out of concerns I heard from constituents. I was contacted by a constituent who is in a public water system, and the public water system was requiring everybody to get smart meters, and he didn't want to have a smart meter. And then he also didn't want to have to pay to not have a smart meter, because sometimes there are fees charged if you opt out of a smart meter. And in 2013 or somewhere around there, there was a law that was passed that allows you to opt out of a smart meter for gas and electric. And the law at that point prohibited those utilities from charging for people to opt out, and that's still on the books. I chose not to deal with that in this bill, but it's something we might want to think about if people are interested. There was also a study done at that time by the Department of Health, and about the health impacts of smart meters, and the Department of Health found that there are not health impacts by the use of smart meters. In fact, before I knew about that, I Googled smart meter public health, and what literally came up was the Vermont study that the state of Minnesota had posted on their Department of Health website. So I was like, oh, how interesting. But anyway,
all of that is sort of background to what this bill does, which is, it would allow people who are, users of public water system to opt out of using a smart meter. But in talking to the Rural Water Association and several, local water systems, when people opt out of it, out of a smart meter, the reason why, they use smart meters is because they save money. You don't have to pay somebody to come out and read a meter, and so it saves money, it saves driving around, et cetera. And so there's a cost to the water system for people who opt out. So rather than say you don't have to pay that cost, if because if you don't, if the person who opts out doesn't pay, everybody else's water rates go up to make up the difference. There's a provision in the bill that would say that the water system can charge, but they can only charge the cost. They can't put on a fee on top of it. It's just, what is the cost to the water system for the opt-out? The other concern I heard from my constituent and others, and that has been in the news recently, and if you didn't see them, I can send you 2 recent news articles about it, is the cybersecurity of public water systems. So if you're using smart meters, you're obviously collecting data. And so that if this bill would require that if you are a public water system using smart meters, you have to meet minimum cybersecurity standards in order to use those smart meters. What is in the bill is based on the recommendations of the Rural Water Association, the Vermont Rural Water Association. We should hear from them. They may have something else that they want to recommend, but that was just where we landed before that deadline of drafting the bill, to make sure we have something in there. So those are the 3 things it would do, is say you can't be forced to do a smart meter, but that you have to pay the cost if you don't do it, and that water systems have to meet minimum cybersecurity standards. So that's the bill.
So should I be here?
Yes, please.
Again, this is Mike Grady, Let's Council, walking through S-213. We were just talking about the division that issues permits for wells and septic systems and connections. Well, that same division issues the permits for public water systems. What is a public water system? Public water system is defined largely based on the Safe Drinking Water Act, Federal Safe Drinking Water Act, which requires systems that provide drinking water to a certain number of persons or connections to meet health and safety standards. And you will see what that definition is on page 2, line 10. Any system or combination of systems owned or controlled by a person that provides drinking water through pipes or other constructed conveyances to the public, and that has at least 15 service connections or serves an average of at least 25 individuals for at least 60 days a year. So for the purposes of this bill, you're dealing with the type of public water system that has service connections. You're not dealing with the serves at least 25 individuals. That's like a school or an office building. Or that type, that's a public water. They're usually called transient or non-transient public water system. You're talking here about effectively community-based public water system, but we're not using that term because on page. Well, look, I'll tell you, I'll come back to why we're not using community-based water system in a second. The definitions of smart meter, wired smart meter, and wireless smart meter are on page 4 through 11. They generally follow the law that Senator Carney referenced, that is regarding smart meters used for gas and electric. So a wired meter is pretty intuitive. It's an advanced metering infrastructure device using a fixed wire for two-way communications between the device and the public water system. A wireless meter is an advanced metering infrastructure device using radio or other wireless two-way communications between the device and the water system. Now, the kind of true meat of the statutory change is going to focus on wireless smart meters. And you will see on page 3 where that is implemented. You are in 1675, section 2. These are the permits for public water systems. and you were adding a subdivision subsection related to smart meters and customer rates. First of all, right now, public water systems are not required to have meters. It says that the rule for the public water system says that they should have a metering or other device to measure usage, but it's not a requirement. But obviously, if you're charging for use, you probably, and you're charging based on a rate or a usage, then you need some sort of metering device or measurement device. So if a public water system requires a user of the system to install a meter to measure use, so it's not just community. If you have a meter, or if you're required to have a meter to utilize that public water system, the public water system may install a wireless smart meter on a user's premises. So the systems can still do that, provided that they give written notice to the user indicating that the meter will use radio or other wireless means, and informing the user of the user's rights under subdivisions 2 and 3 and page 4, lines 7 through 13. And those rights are: the system has to allow the user to choose not to have a wireless smart meter installed, provided that the public water system may charge the user for the cost of the alternative meter and an additional service charge required for the public water system to operate the alternative meter. And again, user right, allow the user to require removal of a previously installed wireless smart meter for any reason and in a brief amount of time without incurring any charge for such removal. And then, as Senator Hardy referenced, there are cybersecurity measures as a condition of the public water system. Issue permit, the secretary shall require a public water system using smart meters to demonstrate that the public water system has implemented and is administering cybersecurity measures to protect the computer infrastructure and data of the public water system for the unauthorized access that could result in damage or disruptions. Then there is the development of those cybersecurity measures. ANR develops those measures that all public water systems permitted shall implement if the public water systems using smart meters. At a minimum, they shall be consistent with the cybersecurity actions recommended by the Rural Water Association, and the public water system permitted under Chapter 56 shall until July 2027 demonstrate ANR compliance with cybersecurity requirements. Now, there are some cybersecurity guidance on the agency's website, but it's not a condition of the permit. This is, you're going to be using some wireless, then you have to meet those conditions.
A question about that, and it's, I guess, for Senator Hardy, any thoughts on including ADS in that? We're just wondering, I mean, if they already, if ANR already has guidance, maybe it's like, we're gonna require that.
I don't know, I mean, we should just hear from them to see, and check ANR, I mean, to be, I checked in with the Rural Water Association
Yeah.
because they have cybersecurity measures and asked them, you know, what do you recommend? And, they were like, oh, we should talk to ANR, but then we ran out of time and I had to, so this was what we could do
Yeah.
to have it in the bill. ANR probably has some ideas and maybe ADS, I don't know.
And it occurred to me, like, I was seeing like in consultation with, you know.
Yeah, I mean, that's totally fair, and there, I don't know if there are federal cybersecurity requirements for water systems or not.
Not that I know of. I mean, the Safe Drinking Water Act does, when those rules, EPA changes those rules, they do trickle down to the state level, but I'm not aware of any for cybersecurity as of yet. Sorry.
I was just gonna say, I can send you guys all those two articles, if you didn't see them, there was, they both deal with a rural. Water system in Vermont, I think it's in Cavendish, that is sort of, early adopter of trying to help with cybersecurity protocols for rural water systems because they're literally being targeted by
Mhm.
bad actors. So I think it's important that we have some standards for our systems.
I will say that Brian Redden, the head of the division, is on vacation until the 17th. But that Montrose is immediate if you want to talk. For one of them, and Ben is probably the person you're gonna get most immediately.
Okay, well, that is good to know. Especially for timing. Okay, any other thoughts or questions about this? Okay, well, thank you, Senator Hurd, for bringing this forward.
Sure.
And we have, one more bill to talk through before. Before Mike has to go, and then. I mean, we have till 11:30 today. My guess is that we could potentially invite Ellen back. Well, we can see if that's.
Yeah.
I'll let her give her a heads up.
Okay.
You have to leave, it was 15, right?
Yeah, so.
Thank you.
Okay, so S218. This is
Forget next week.
oh, did you get on that?
Yeah, sure, yeah.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
Right.
So, this is the salt bill. It had a long path.
I mean, did you have to reintroduce this? Whatever happened to it?
So it is still in judiciary,
Oh,
and so some of the language that they had talked through ended up in 319, which we didn't do, and so we figured that the best path forward to just get this done was to introduce a new bill. So this language should look very familiar, and so my hope is that it actually won't take that long necessarily to go through. But as I understand it, this is language that you think, you know, our judiciary has seen and has agreed to, or they had voted on it, or maybe not voted, but they had talked through it. And yes, so with that, I'm gonna turn it over to you.
So again, Mike agree, as the council. The language in front of you is 90% of what you saw previously. I mean, 2% are changing dates. And doing a technical renumbering of the chapter because. Last year, something else went into the chapter that had the numbers, so I had to just. Read them.
Fair enough.
So those are the major changes as you both, as everyone has indicated. S29 came out of this committee, went to judiciary discussed. Moved away from the presumption of no liability to an affirmative defense. That was reviewed in the House. It was in H319. That was in this committee, passed out of the committee. What passed out of the committee is except for those 2% changes, what is in front of you.
So,
So on page 2, you'll see that the purpose of the bill is to establish a standard of care for the applied application of salt or salt alternatives. I'm gonna just say salt instead of salt or salt alternatives every time. Just so we are all on the same page. And is to provide for safe conditions for travel and pedestrians while also reducing the water quality impacts of salt application. Then you have that section 2. Creates a new subchapter in chapter 47, title 10. Chapter 47 is the water pollution control chapter in title 10. This is going in there. Last year it was subchapter 3A and it was 1351, but you put the CAPO program in there. And so now we would have dealt with that through statutory revision last year. We would have just redone the numbers ourselves, but now that the K-4 program's in place, I can't just say we're gonna put it in 13-15 make it. So we've had to change that. Applies, all of the definitions are exactly the same. Apply salt or salt alternatives to roadway or parking lots is what apply salt is. It does not include application of salt to transportation, infrastructure, construction project. Remember, AOT was very sensitive to that and was very clear that because of the nature of their construction schedules, that they couldn't necessarily comply, and they have their own standards as well. Commercial salt applicators and individual who for compensation apply salt. But it does not include municipal or state employees. The master commercial salt applicator is that person who can get certified to train individuals within their company. So every individual has to be certified, but the master can train them and they still get the affirmative defense. Salt is pretty much every version of fluoride that you can think of. Salt alternative is every version that's not fluoride that's used for de-icing purposes. Secretary is who you think it is, and then transportation infrastructure construction project is a project that involves the construction of roadways, parking for sidewalks or other construction activities at transportation facilities or within transportation rights of way. Then you have the creation of the program, and after consultation with other states, because remember, there are other states that do this, New Hampshire, the Adirondacks, Wisconsin, etc.
No page.
Page, bottom of page 3, going on to page 4, they will create the chloride contamination reduction program for the voluntary education training and cert. This is not a mandatory program. This is a program for voluntary education and training. I will note that if there isn't some sort of fluoride contamination reduction, waters are already impaired for fluoride, and more waters are approaching impairment for fluoride. And if that happens, there will need to be TMDL for those waters and potentially a TMDL for regional waters for fluoride. And that would be mandatory. So this is a step, a voluntary step to try to avoid pushing commercial salt application into a mandatory program under a TMDL. Just to put that on the table.
Which might include, you don't salt your roads.
Or you can only use this type of application. Or you can only apply at a certain distance from the water. And you need to have equipment that monitors your application. Because this recognizes that current applicators might have that equipment, but it doesn't require it. And you heard last year that some applicators don't have that and can still comply with certification just by record keeping on A&R's model form. And so this is a cautionary program to avoid, I won't say it's inevitable, but it'll avoid the probable impairment of some waters from fluoride.
Do you have a comment? Yes, ma'am.
So we have some waters that are already, contaminated. There is some way we can prioritize as we phase this in. I can see it good as a preventative for the whole state, but it's kind of like my point about the 3 acre rule. You got properties that are definitely contributing to the phosphorus going to the water. Well, why don't we identify them as being needed fixing and then.
Well, I think if you wanted to, you could do that, but I think from an administrative application, a voluntary program that statewide will hopefully reduce fluoride across the state, but will potentially reduce fluoride enough in the already impaired water so that they're not impaired anymore. And you don't have to go to a stringent requirement like the requirements that we just discussed. If they can get through a voluntary program, the reduction of the waste load from that program, why not try it?
Well, we listened to New Hampshire, Go Green or whatever it was.
Green snow from.
Green smoke flow, and basically I guess they've got some, they've got some, a case is pending right now, but because somebody slipped and got hurt because they actually did it. They didn't have, if we don't get contractors to buy into this and partaking in the process, municipalities and state pretty much are exempt from the way the original vote.
Well, the state AOT already has its standards and it already has the state tort liability protection, right? So they're kind of, they don't want to be involved because they think they're already addressed.
Right.
This will address municipalities later on, but I will discuss some municipal concerns when I get there.
Okay.
New Hampshire, there was a case, New Hampshire won.
Oh, they did.
The applicator won. They had the records to show that they were applying according to the best management practices. They also showed that the person who was injured not from stepping on the impervious surface of pavement, but by like walking off the grass / curb at, and they don't have a duty to maintain the snow or ice on the grass or curb next to the impervious surface. And so they were successful. Should I move on?
Yes.
Yeah.
So it's a voluntary education, training, and certification program that provides for the effective and efficient application that will maintain safety while also improving the quality of the waters of the state. That's part of the program on or before July 1, 2027. So that's pushed 1 year out from last year. Best management practices for the application of salt by commercial applicators. Those BMPs may be based on what AOT already does. They shall include techniques to increase the efficiency of application while maintaining safe conditions. They shall establish standards for when and how salt are applied in order to prevent salt entering waters of the state, including alternatives that are cost effective and less harmful to water quality. Equipment, including calibration. Senator Hardy, I remember you wanted calibration last year. And monitoring or metering of the concentration of salt.
Not me.
And when sand is an appropriate alternative for de-icing or dust control, particularly in regard to this application of sand will be less harmful to water quality. The BMPs will have record keeping requirements for the commercial applicators, including records of training, dates of use, weather conditions, and any other factors. A&R is going to create a model form for record keeping, so you don't need to have the equipment that does your record keeping. You can do a form. You can establish requirements for certification, establish requirements for testing, and learn on page 6. Establish other requirements deemed necessary by the secretary to achieve the purposes of the program. Page 6, line 3, the program shall offer training for commercial applicators in the implementation of the BMPs. Upon completion of the training, the applicator shall be designated as certified commercial salt applicator. That has a 2-year term. Commercial salt applicators have a 2-year term. Talking about municipal applicators in a second. Then page 6, line 9 through 15, this is that subdivision that addresses the master commercial salt applicator and their training of individuals that are within their business. They are allowed to do that. But they shall ensure that all persons employed by the business apply salt are trained to comply with the best management practices that AIM develops. The certified salt applicator, commercial salt applicator has to report annually to ANR the total winter salt usage, and that I have a question for you, that do you want them to report salt alternative, just salt?
It's a chlorine.
So,
Yeah.
What did you say?
It's a chlorine.
chloride bill, so,
I don't know.
But, but the application of salt means the salt or the application of salt or salt alternatives, so.
Well, and.
It's like beet juice or.
Yeah, okay, let me talk. That's a good question. Let's put a pin in that.
okay, all right,
Oh, it's on.
page 6,
line.
line 16.
Yeah.
My sense is. One thought is to leave it as it is because it's the same, and that way. People who have reviewed it, they may not care, but, a separate question about that is what are we concerned about, and are there salt alternatives that we're less concerned about? If we leave it as it is, as it is, it would include salt alternatives, and so would they make that differentiation? This is what's happening with chloride, and this is what's happening with the alternatives.
So I don't think it would include, if you leave it as it is, salt alternatives, because it doesn't say application, it says annual summary of total winter salt usage. It doesn't say application.
You could just change it to application and then it would include it, right?
If you change it, tweak it a little bit, the total winter application of salt, yeah, I think it will.
Yeah, because the beginning, as you pointed out,
Yeah.
includes both, but
I don't care that much, but unless there's a reason to do it, but that would make it more consistent.
Well, I'm gonna circle it for now, and
If you're using it to avoid it.
Yeah, well,
There goes.
yes, but part of it is if it's an uncovered pile, you are going to lose some of it to.
Well, the uncovered piles issue.
Mhm,
The covered salt sheds thing.
We're gonna get that.
mhm.
So moving on page 6, line 17, ANR establishes the methods that estimate and track the amount of salt applied by commercial salt applicators. Secretary may revoke a certification for non-compliance with the requirements of the subchapter, any rules adopted under the subchapter or provisions of the certification. Page 7, line 3 through 8, these are some technical requirements for the program. They shall include requirements for certification of the master commercial salt applicator. They shall specifically exclude salt applications related to transportation infrastructure construction projects. And they may elect to enter the program to CHCC staff or through a third party vendor. I think New Hampshire Green Snow Pros started with a third party vendor and then went to state staff. Then on page 7, line 9, you have the affirmative defense, the certified commercial salt applicator, or the owner, occupant, or lessee of real property maintained by that certified applicator shall have an affirmative defense against the claim for damages resulting from the hazard caused by snow or ice. If the claim damages were caused solely by snow or ice, and any failure or delay in removing or mitigating the hazard is the result of the certified commercial salt applicator's implementation of the best management practices. The affirmative defense provided is not applicable when civil damages are due to gross negligence or reckless disregard of the hazard. The affirmative defense provided under subsection A is not exclusive, it is in addition to any of those defenses or immunities provided under state law. In order to assert page 8, line 4, in order to assert the affirmative defense, the certified applicator or the owner, or lessee of the real property maintained by the certified applicator, but keep a record describing its road, parking lot, and property maintenance practices consistent with the requirements determined by the secretary. That record shall include the type and rate of application, the dates of treatment and weather conditions for each event requiring DAC. Then you get on page 8, line 13, this is a presumption of compliance with water quality, because if you. There are some applications that could technically violate a stormwater permit, or could for a property, or could actually be construed to be a discharge into a water. You are providing that certified salt applicator with a presumption that they are in compliance with the discharge requirements and the stormwater requirements if they are applying according to the best management practices. So you're not gonna, you're gonna give them an extra regulatory bonus for being a certified applicator. The rebuttable presumption shall not apply to requirements under a TMDL or under a municipal separate storm sewer system permit. If there are already federally required provisions for commercial salt applicators, which may occur in some of the chloride impaired waters, you can't legislate away those requirements. Unfortunately, I wish you could. On page 9, line 4 through 7, the secretary may revoke the certification after opportunity for a hearing for violations of the requirements of rules for a certification. Page 9, line 8, the secretary through the program shall conduct education and outreach to inform applicators of the program and the affirmative defense office, inform members of the public who purchase salt or salt alternatives of the potential harm to water quality, pets and wildlife from excessive application of salt, and how to decrease the potential harm. Page 10 is the uncovered salt and sand storage issue. It is a report that ANR provides to the General Assembly regarding the management of state and municipal facilities for the storage of salt and sand mixtures, salt alternatives, and sand that is not mixed with salt. It shall include an inventory of facilities in the state used for that storage of those substances that is not mixed with salt. Estimate of the number of storage of those facilities that use those substances. An estimate of the number of facilities that are currently covered, an estimate of the number of facilities that are not covered, or that are within 100 yards of the surface water or drinking water source. An estimate of the number of facilities that are not covered, more than 100 yards from the surface drinking water source, and an estimate of the total cost to cover or move facilities that store those substances. On page 11, section 4, this is where you get the provision for municipal salt applicators. Municipal salt applicators are already required to do Vermont local roads curriculum that is administered by the Secretary of Transportation. And this requires that curriculum shall include provisions about training for best management practices for spreading salt or salt alternatives on roads, parking lots, and sidewalks. When on page 11, line 13, through the end of the page 13 through 18, notwithstanding the provisions of 24 BSA 901A, which is the potential liability of municipalities and municipal employees, a municipal employee shall have an affirmative defense against claim for damages resulting from the hazard caused by snow or ice. If the municipal salt applicator completed the Vermont local roads curriculum, providing best management practices for spreading salt or salt alternatives The claim damages were caused solely by snow or ice. Any failure or delay in removing or mitigating the hazard as a result of this is salt applicators implementation of the BMPs. And then again, state standards, don't get to claim it if the harm was due to gross negligence or reckless disregard. The affirmative defense is not exclusive. The municipality may provide other defenses in order to assert the affirmative defense. The municipal applicators need to maintain records. I want to stop here and say the municipalities have been asking the judiciary committees to provide basically immunity from tort liability. And this is something that gives them some immunity, but not the full immunity that they're looking for. I do think they had some concerns with this, is that being only a half step measure when they want maybe 10 more steps. And just be prepared for the league to provide testimony looking for full.
Who's they? So they.
VLCT.
Yeah.
Well, and just for context, Steve, because this is largely the same bill. And we've already taken testimony on this, we're gonna have pretty narrow testimony on this. Because we've heard it. And there we go. Sorry.
All right. Section 5 is a fee report. A&R shall solicit interest from third-party vendors for training under the program. The secretary shall recommend to the General Assembly whether it should be by a third-party vendor and whether he should be charged by the third-party vendor for certification of commercial salt applicators. You might remember at one point you allowed the agency to just hire the commercial vendor and allow the commercial vendor to charge a fee in your appropriations committees for saying, no, we want to know what the fee is, we need authorized. And then you got a contingent implementation. This was in 319 last year, the duty of A&R to implement both the chloride contamination reduction program, the municipal salt applicator program, and the fee report is contingent upon the agency receiving appropriation for that purpose. And then the bill goes into effect on passage, but the dates are baked into the program required.
Yes, go ahead.
Does EPA have a PMBL standard for
So the TMDLs are based on state water quality standards. The Federal Clean Water Act, GPA administers, requires states to adopt water quality standards. And then the states have to go out every 3 years to assess those waters to see if those waters are meeting the state water quality standard. If they aren't meeting the water quality standards, they have to determine what is causing them not to meet the water quality standard. And when I say meet the water quality standards, generally they have to support all the designated uses for the water. The water needs to provide public drinking water. It needs to provide recreation, aesthetics, aquatic habitat, aquatic biota. Missing two of them, I can't remember the other two. But if the water is not supporting one of those uses, it's impaired, and then A&R has to determine why it's impaired. Fluoride might be what's causing that impairment, and at that point, technically, A&R is required to develop a plan, which is usually a TMDL, but can sometimes be something else. And now you're in the like, let's do something else kind of phase here. You have a couple of impaired waters. Let's try something else. If something else doesn't work, A&R is going to probably have to go to full TMDL.
Okay, thank you so much. I know you've got a boogie. So you're gonna change text again. Now, just acknowledging that we need to be done by 11:30. Arguably, the bells gonna start ringing like 11:20. Do we want to try to take on the Energy Navigator bill. Got Ellen? Sure. Okay, that's kind of what I figured, but I just thought I'd check it. So, all right, let's do that. So we're gonna switch to one more bill. Energy Navigators. And this is Senator Hardy's bill, go ahead. Whenever you're.
Whenever I guess. No, you're fine, you're fine. No, you're fine. Okay, this is a pretty short bill, energy navigators, you guys all probably know what they are. They are people that help you assess your home, to determine what kinds of, things you could do to lower your energy usage, whether it's weather stripping or more insulation or switching to a heat pump in part of your house or doing a better wood stove or more efficient furnace, all those kinds of lovely things. They come in and help you assess that and then help you, in some cases, implement those things. And help you also with navigating the regulations and credits and opportunities to lower the cost of all these things. Efficiency Vermont does a lot of this energy navigation, but they do it sort of from a statewide level. And they don't often have boots on the ground. A lot of it is remote or just via their website. They do have a few people, but the need out there is far greater. There are some community-based programs that do this in person and are much more sort of long-term and face-to-face and do much more sort of management of things for individuals with a particular target of lower income individuals who often need more assistance to access these programs. So one of the recommendations for many years, lots of people have been trying to figure out how do we increase energy navigators in our state. And there was a recent report by the Public Utility Commission about lowering energy burden for lower income Vermonters and improving energy equity. And one of the recommendations was to have a more robust energy navigator program. There are other states, neighboring states that have these more robust energy navigator programs, such as the state of Vermont. I'm sorry, we are Vermont, the state of Massachusetts. And then there are others as well. So this bill is building on a program that's actually in my district. It's the Climate Economy Action Center of Addison County that has one of these really hands-on energy navigator programs. There's interest in seeing how could we bring this to other parts of the state. So this bill would ask the SEAC, as they're known in Addison County, to work with Efficiency Vermont to design a program that could be used statewide and increase energy navigators that are much more sort of hands-on in person. There are some appropriations in the bill. One is for to help with the study, both for Efficiency Vermont, and then there's a appropriation for the Climate Energy Action Center that would help them work with Efficiency Vermont to do the study, but also expand their programming. Right now, they're focused on Addison County, but they've had requests from neighboring counties to help build programs in neighboring counties. They're trying to work in Rutland County, and I also think maybe Orange County to do this type of program. So the appropriation would be in part to help them expand into other counties while they're also trying to work on a statewide program. So have many eager constituents who would love to come in and talk about this, but that's what the bill is to start. So yeah.
Ellen Chakowski, Office of Legislative Counsel, S-219. Do you want me to read through all of it? It's pretty, it's short, it's short. All right. So section 1 is the report on the Energy Navigator program. In collaboration with existing community-based Energy Navigator programs in Vermont, such as Climate Economy Action Center of Addison County, Efficiency Vermont shall design a Vermont community-based home energy navigator and coaching program that will provide in-person and remote energy coaching services to residential customers in communities statewide. Efficiency Vermont shall consult with the Vermont State Energy Office, the Vermont Climate Action Office, Vermont's Community Action Agencies, the Vermont Energy and Climate Action Network, Vermont's electric utilities, and other states, including Connecticut and Massachusetts, that have experience, onto page 2, with community-based energy programs. For purposes of this section, residential consumers include homeowners, landlords, and renters. The program shall provide guidance to residential consumers, particularly those with low and moderate incomes, to better understand and navigate energy efficiency and clean energy investment options to affordably meet their home energy needs. Advise residential consumers on accessing available grants, rebates, financing, and other assistance programs and incentives to meet their home energy needs. Assist residential customers in prioritizing identified energy saving opportunities, including through the integration of weatherization strategies to reduce heating and cooling loads that could minimize the need for installation of new equipment and lower future electric demand on the grid. Help residential consumers connect to local contractors and review and analyze contractor recommendations regarding cost, payment, and other relevant factors. Advise residential consumers in person as necessary and over time, recognizing that hands-on coaching may help may be needed at a consumer's home and over several years. On to page 3. Provide ongoing state funding to support the operations of community-based energy coaching programs. And use available grants to provide use available grant funds and private partnerships to support program implementation. On or before January 15, 2027, Efficiency Vermont shall submit a report on the program design to the House Committee on Energy and Digital Infrastructure and the Senate Committee on Natural Resources and Energy. The report shall include a description of the design of the program, which could include the creation of a pilot program or expansion and support of existing community-based programs. A description of the technical assistance and energy educational materials to be developed as part of the program. An estimate of program costs, funding sources to provide ongoing support to community-based energy coaching programs, a target number of residential consumers to be served by the program, energy and emissions savings that will result from the programs, and a proposed timeline for the implementation of the programs. Section 2 is the appropriations. So $15,000 from the general fund to Efficiency Vermont for the development of the report. And then $150,000 from the general fund to the the Climate Economy Action Center to collaborate with Efficiency Vermont on the Energy Navigator program design, to continue to develop, onto page 4, its community-based Energy Navigator resources, programming, and expertise, and to support the expansion of its Energy Navigator program to a neighboring county. Effective date is July 1, 2026.
Questions, but I'm sure we still have time. So in the first section, it says to collaborate with an energy navigator program such as CF. But it sounds like it doesn't have to be CF.
And then the appropriations.
And then the appropriations.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So one possibility is to make that just match like whoever is collaborating. And in
Obviously,
I don't know.
my constituents, so I would, vote for.
Right. And then there was another thing that caught my attention, which was page 2, line 14, about lowering future electric demands on the grid. And I appreciate that as a need. And also some of the solutions that may be useful may not lower the future electric demands on the grid, they may increase it, but while lowering costs for the person. So I just want to appreciate the tension there. And so just flagging that. Yes.
Well, I think that paragraph specifically is alluding to weatherization.
Okay. That mean that. Okay. Or like that's the point of that here.
And so weatherization as a strategy potentially would reduce,
I see. Oh, I see.
but language could be tweaked if you'd like.
Right, well, you know, I mean, I think you could say like weatherization to the end of, you know. Lowering. Okay, any other thoughts or questions? Okay, super, well, thank you, and so we are done for the day, got through